Welcome back, David. Hydrogen hype, because we talk a lot, a lot of our videos end up about deuterium depleted water, and we know it's different type of hydrogen and whatnot. And now we have these hydrogen pills, hydrogen filters, and so on and so forth. I've had a conversation as well with somebody where I suggested them, hey, you might try this deuterium depleted water. It's gonna cost you $200 per case of water. You probably need multiple of those to actually feel the benefits at the end. And the question was, oh, can't I have just hydrogen, this little filter? And I'm like, what's the crack? What's the difference? Let's open up about that.
Yeah. So first, let's. This is one of those things where it's kind of like a half truth, right? But a half truth allows you to con people, right? So we'll get into first why is hydrogen in the body very, very beneficial, and why there's two types of hydrogen that your body uses, and then we'll get into the details of the considerations when you're going to supplement some type of hydrogen. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen here so that we have something to talk to. And this is something that people have seen before in our videos. So it shouldn't be foreign to them if they've seen it before or if they've seen our videos before. But right here, right, this is the into mitochondrial membrane. And you see right here, there are substrates, right? That's coming from food. And those substrates are NADH and FADH.
By
And
the
the
way,
H,
before you carry on, because we show this quite a lot, name me a book that's best to buy to start to understand the thing. I think everyone should at least pick up biology for dummies or something like that. What would be your
yeah, and any mitochondrial book, I don't have any specific books because they all kind of have these types of diagrams in them. Any biology for dummies or anything like that, but specifically mitochondria, right? That's what you want to be looking for is any mitochondrial book is going to give you the ins and the outs of this, and you want it to be specific about the mitochondria because biology quickly leaves the mitochondria alone. And that is actually the problem with a lot of modern medicine and research. They're focusing on the genetics, the nuclear genetics, and other processes in the cell, but they forget that those processes are dictated by the mitochondria. So you want a mitochondrial specific book. Uh,
Yeah, because everything we pretty much talk about, every single issue that comes with health starts here.
yes, 100%, 100%. And so there isn't just one book out there, but anything that talks about the mitochondria or anything that's specific about the mitochondria is going to be a beneficial read. And then from there, you can go with books like by Robert O. Becker, which is The Body Electric, where he goes into the electrical components of how biology works. And all electrical components of how biology works happen in the mitochondria or start in the mitochondria. And the reason for that is that's where electricity is created for the body, right? And so, and that's what diagram is kind of showing you. The electrons from NADH and FADH are going to be transported across here, and the hydrogen, right, the H in FADH and NADH are what's being pumped across here. That's all these H pluses. So if you are lacking hydrogen, guess what? You can't pump hydrogen across here. So hydrogen is beneficial for all metabolism. They're not the people that are promoting hydrogen tablets or the water bottles that hydrogenate your water and that sort of thing. They are correct in saying that hydrogen is a very precious molecule used by mitochondria and biology to do all of its processes. Here's the thing that they almost all of them miss, and that's the following. H2O, right? So the hydrogen that gets pumped across this proton comes over here and interacts with oxygen that you're being delivered through your blood supply, and that creates water, H2O. Most people have been told this or have seen this in some kind of book or have been told, through us, but that water should be light water, meaning this hydrogen comes in two formats, right? The formats are as follows. The formats are going to be protium, which is one proton and one electron right here. Or deuterium, which has a proton and a neutron in the middle and then one electron on the outside. This makes deuterium twice as heavy or twice as gravitationally uh, um, interacting. Meaning, if you made the planet Earth twice as big, there would be twice as much gravity. That means that you would weigh more. That means that processes like putting satellites into the atmosphere and stuff like that would take twice as much energy, right? That's the easiest way to think about this. When you have something that's twice the mass, it takes twice as much energy to get things moving around it and interacting with it versus protium, which would be lighter, right? It is when I say light hydrogen, I literally mean the mass is lighter. And when I say deuterium is heavy hydrogen, it is literally heavier, it has more mass, right? And so what that
I think
means
they
is,
found even the fourth one in on ocean floor just a couple of months ago. I read about it. So
yeah, there are some others, right, that for all intents and purposes happen in very special environments, right? I have a third one here, tritium, and that only happens with the manufacturing of radioactive stuff, right? So that's the new, and so tritium is not something that biology really uses, and neither is the fourth one. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. They do exist, but they're just under very special circumstances. But in the body, you're going to have both of these. You're going to have protium and you're going to have deuterium. Now, the deuterium, because it's twice as heavy, it is used in the body. For example, your blood collects a lot of deuterium. Why? Because it is paramagnetic. Hydrogen is paramagnetic. What does that mean? That means it can act like a metal, it can act like a plasma, and essentially your blood, when it accumulates deuterium, acts like a Faraday cage if you're grounded. It acts as a way for you to not get too much electrical signaling inside of the body because a lot of your blood flow is surface, right? Surface blood flow and that sort of stuff. Um, and protium is what's being made or kept, I should say. That's a better way to say it. It is what's being kept in the cell in the mitochondrial membranes here to make light water. So what I'm saying is light hydrogen is what should be here, and it's what should be here so that you can make light water inside of the mitochondrial matrix and then into the cytosol of the cell. Why is that important? Because it's light, meaning it allows for processes to move at light speed a lot faster than they would have if this is deuterium. So when you understand that there are two versions of hydrogen, the first thing you should ask yourself whenever you're going to, be pitched, let's talk about hydrogen tablets, right? Because those are kind of popular right now. You better know whether the hydrogen in those tablets is deuterium or protium.
can you
If you
even
don't,
make them in tablets? Can you make deuterium depleted tablets?
yes, you can, and we'll talk about that. It has to come. So the way that they make the tablets is by the cheapest way, and I promise you they're always going to use the cheapest way because it's about making money, right? And the cheapest way to do it is you take water, right? Because it already has hydrogen and it already has oxygen, and you go through electrolysis and you separate them out. And so on one end, you'll end up with oxygen, and on the other end, you'll end up with hydrogen. This is basic hydrogen fuel cell technology, right? So hydrogen fuel cells that are being used in cars and engines and stuff like that. It's the same process. It's very cheap and affordable to do it that way. So what that means is this: the water that you start with is what's going to determine the deuterium level of the hydrogen that gets separated out. So if your water is just normal water, it's probably about 150 parts per million. That means that the hydrogen tablets that are made from that water are 150 parts per million deuterium. What does that mean? It means that it's no more healthier than the original water that you started with.
Mm.
That's what it means. Now, bringing in more hydrogen into the body is going to be helpful, but is it going to be as helpful? Meaning, will you notice a difference if you add hydrogen tablets to your normal drinking water, and those hydrogen tablets were made from normal drinking water? The answer is no. Did you hydrate better? That's a question, and the answer is probably yes, because you were able to consume more hydrogen than you would have from the water, right? Like there's only so much water you can fit in your body, right? Like even if I dedicated a whole day to just drinking water, the best that I can do is maybe 2 gallons of water, right? But if I'm adding hydrogen tablets to that water, am I hydrating better? And the answer is yes. So it's not a zero benefit is what I'm saying, right? Like it's not zero benefit. But here's the catch. If, for example, they're using, because you can also make hydrogen tablets from the gas, the hydrogen gas, right? And that's through a chemical process. That can actually make it more deuterium heavy. So normal water, 150 parts per million. Some processes for making the gas makes it deuterium heavy, meaning it's higher than 150 parts per million. And if you're getting tablets that are made from that, well, now you're doing yourself a disservice. Now you're actually slowing down all of the processes in the cell because you're actually making the hydrogen content, the deuterium content go up. So this cell, mitochondria and your cells are supposed to function at about 120 parts per million or lower. But if you're adding in 150 parts per million or higher of hydrogen, you're ticking up that deuterium level, which means you're going to slow down metabolic processes.
So essentially, you might end up feeling more hydrated and kind of little bit better for a little while, but in long term, it can backfire because everything now slows down, every recovery process, metabolic process, and every enzyme production, everything like that. In the long run,
Yes.
you're just not taking anything.
100%. Because that's the whole pitch, right? Like, oh, we're making it easy to add more hydrogen so people drop a tablet or two in their water and they do that every single day. But if those tablets contain more deuterium than your body is meant to function with, in the long run, you end up accumulating deuterium,
Mm.
right? Instead of lowering deuterium. And that is what I wanted that's a question that a lot of people have been kind of asking me when, after a few episodes of talking about deuterium depleted water. Yes, it's expensive because it's expensive to lower the deuterium content of water.
Time consuming
Not
as hell.
say that again.
It's time consuming as hell.
It is. It is a very time-consuming process, so that's why it's expensive. It's not necessarily difficult. It just takes a long damn time to do it. And so people are like, well, can I take the hydrogen tablets? I'm like, only if you can tell me that it's low in deuterium, because if it's not, it's going to do you more harm than good in the long run. Now, in the short period of time, right, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it's not a big deal. But that's not the purpose of supplementing hydrogen. That they're going to tell you to take it for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. And if the hydrogen tablets are not being tested for the deuterium content, and I will tell you this, I've gone through a lot of sites that are selling the deuterium tablets and that sort of stuff, then you actually, none of them, number one, none of them tell you the deuterium content of the hydrogen that they're supplying you. They completely
I
skip
have
that.
not seen them in Europe yet.
The tablets.
So I need to check out because Europe has much stricter rules on anything like that. In America, you can sell anything to anyone.
Yeah,
All the
yeah,
time.
that's very true.
What is this
But
magic supplement? I'm like, it doesn't even tell you what's inside there. Proprietary blend. You will not be able to sell anything that has proprietary blend written on it in Europe. You need to tell
yeah,
people what are they consuming.
yeah. And so and that's actually probably why they're not allowing them to sell it in the tablet because they're not disclosing what's actually in it. Yes, it's hydrogen, but what is it? Deuterium heavy, deuterium low, protium. It could even be just like you said. If if it's contaminated, right, maybe their sourcing of the hydrogen, it could be some tritium that's radioactive, right? Like you have to be careful about the type of hydrogen you put in your body is what I'm trying to get at, right? And so because the body, the biological processes in the body need low deuterium content to function appropriately, right? And that is why I go out of my way to recommend exclusively deuterium depleted water. Now, having said that, there's another product out on the market which is it's like a shaker bottle. It looks like a shaker bottle, and it you put water in it, and it does electrolysis in it, and it makes more hydrogen in it. Here's the thing: the hydrogen was already in the water. That's a pitch. They're telling you, oh, it's going to make more hydrogen. It cannot. It cannot make more hydrogen than was already in the water. That's physics 101. You cannot destroy or make something out of thin air, right? So if the hydrogen wasn't already in the water, you're not all of a sudden going to end up with more hydrogen by putting it in a bottle and pressing a little button to create electrolysis. All you're doing is separating the hydrogen from the oxygen that's already in the water that you put in there. Right. So that one right there is complete garbage. Like the little hydrogen electrolysis bottles, they're garbage. They literally are garbage because the hydrogen that was in the water is still the hydrogen the electrolysis is going to produce. And you're not going to get extra. Now, the tablets, can you make deuterium depleted tablets? Yes, but you have to start with deuterium depleted water. And there's only one company that I have found they sell deuterium depleted water, and they are making tablets out of their water, right? It's the only company I would trust. But here's the thing: you need to put that tablet in water, right? So if your water that you're drinking is 100, let's just do the simple math for a moment. Say you have the equivalent of 1 liter of hydrogen in the tablets. That's going to be about 4 or 5 tablets. And you put it in regular drinking water that's 150 parts per million, and the tablets are 10 parts per million. You don't end up with 10 parts per million. You end up with something like 100 parts per million. So you did lower the content, and that would be beneficial, but it's not the same as drinking 10 parts per million deuterium depleted water. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that is what I wanted to kind of talk about today, is that these processes are heavily dependent on the type of hydrogen. Um, and so if we go, um, let's see here. Right here. Okay. So bonding networks and that sort of stuff. So H3 and H2O. This is what's called structured water, or the water that's in cells. Like when I say that the mitochondria is going to make water, don't think of it like the water that you can drink. It's more like a gel, right? It's because it's inside of a cell. And that is what this diagram is showing you right here. Water and hydrogen molecules bond into specific structures that make it a little bit more stable so that it can hold structures like ribosomes and all the other structures within the cell. It holds them in space. It's kind of like thinking of it like a solar system, right? The Earth is located precisely this far away from Mars and precisely this far away from the sun. And the reason for that is the gravitational pull of all of these planets and all of these structures in space. It's the same concept. The difference is, instead of having nothing, aka space, you have water that's structured, and it keeps everything where it should be inside of a cell. And at the same time, because it's light hydrogen or light water that should be making up the cytosol, then it is able to communicate very quickly. So in other words, the mitochondria is communicating with ribosomes, it's communicating with the nucleus, it's communicating with everything in the cell. If you have heavy hydrogen, that communication slows down, just like we spoke about a little bit earlier. That means that the process of creating metabolic things like peptides, enzymes, all of that gets slowed down when it's heavy water. When it's light water, it can happen very fast. And so you're able to create dopamine, you're able to create hormones, you're able to create enzymes at a much faster pace when you are deuterium depleted. And here is why I would say if you do not know the hydrogen content of hydrogen that you're adding to, that you're supplementing, you're better off not doing it and just going with water if you're trying to save money, right? Because the appeal of the tablets is that they're cheaper than the water. But if you don't know the content, you could be damaging yourself, or at best you're breaking even. You're hydrating a little bit better, but if you're lucky and the hydrogen tablets are normal drinking water deuterium level, then you're just hydrating a little bit better, which isn't bad, right? And that should cost you just a little bit. But if you're truly trying to advance or the best way that I would say it is reverse metabolic processes to the speed of what they would normally happen when you're younger, right? Then I would say you need to stick with deuterium depleted hydrogen, however you get that. The easiest way to be able to validate that would be with deuterium depleted water because they are specifically selling you the water that's deuterium depleted. They have to test it. You can ask for the testing, and and I've done this. You can purchase water from these people and you can send it to go get tested for deuterium for like $100, and it should come back exactly what they stated. Hey, this parts per million of deuterium is 25 parts per million if you're buying that type of water, or 10 parts per million, or 50 parts per million. Those are usually the common deuterium depletion levels: 50 parts per million, 25 parts per million, or 10 or 5 parts per million. And that is testable, right? It's not you don't guess. That goes along with everything else that we've talked about. If you're guessing, you're probably going to make mistakes. But if you're going with something that can be tested and is easy to test, then you know what you're putting in your body.
And again, these things have come up just because now we consume a lot of nutrients, can't even call them nutrients, a lot of processed foods that are deuterium rich, right? This is why you have
Correct.
exceptionally good results with people who are starting to drink deuterium depleted water, because the natural processes that we go through daily are not there anymore. People barely
Correct.
sweat when they go to gym. And I'm like, what did you do there? But
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that for a little bit, right? Like sweating, like really sweating, like getting your heart rate up and sweating for, 20, 30 minutes. That depletes deuterium. Being out in the sun, that depletes deuterium. Eating deuterium low foods, those are going to be anything that is natural fat. Natural fat meaning animal fats, for example. The animal is depleting the deuterium for you and storing it in its fat stores. So if you eat a steak, for example, a grass-fed steak, that grass-fed steak, the fat in that steak has less deuterium than a steak that was manufactured. And I know that's kind of crazy to say, but there are manufactured meats these days. Those they are not deuterium depleted. So now you're going to consume a higher deuterium content. Other foods that are higher in deuterium, carbohydrates. Why? Because think of it this way. If you've been following us for any length of time, you understand that being out in the sun accelerates metabolic processes. And that's not hard to understand. Like in the summertime, you live in the UK, you feel like, hey, I have more energy because I can be outside longer, the day is longer, more of these metabolic processes are going on for longer periods of time, etc. So the food that grows in that season has more deuterium than food that's in the winter. The reason for that is it's how it keeps the metabolic processes in check, right? So, but if you're eating summertime foods in the winter, you're accumulating deuterium in a time when you can't actually deplete deuterium naturally because the days are shorter. You're not getting as much sunlight. You're not as active. So you're not depleting deuterium nearly as quickly. But if you're consuming bananas and oranges and apples in the middle of winter, and they haven't been, they're not growing where you live, right? They're being imported from somewhere where there is a lot of sunlight. Nature is not cohesive there. So you're actually going to end up accumulating deuterium. This is going back to some of our first episodes of like how to eat seasonally and why that's beneficial. This is the core concept in that. If you, in the wintertime, when you have less sunlight to deplete deuterium, you shouldn't be consuming foods that are really high in deuterium. That doesn't mean zero. You can consume some here and there. Like I said, it's not going to hurt you. But if that is your main diet, like I always eat, a pound of rice with, 5 apples every day, and you did that year round and you live in the UK, in the wintertime, you're going to find that you put on body fat, you put on weight very, very easily because the metabolic processes that are going to normally be enhanced in the summertime are not enhanced. And so you're not depleting deuterium quite as easily. Um,
And it kind of
and that
highlights why I can get away with 1,000 grams of carbs a day and not feel lethargic because I move all the time. And
Mhm. Yeah,
everything.
you're moving all the time. You spend a lot of time outside. You go outside often when you can, that sort of stuff. All of that enhances the effect um, of how your body deals with deuterium. Again, deuterium is not bad, right? It has
Yeah, that's something I want to kind of highlight what you kind of keep saying, but not say directly, is that it can be protective, right?
correct, right? Like I said, you're going to consume deuterium, right? There's no way around it. The water has some deuterium in it. Depending on where it's coming from, it can have a low content or a moderate content. The foods will have deuterium. Fruits and carbs will have more deuterium than fats and proteins. Those all work cohesively, but I'll share my screen one more time. Um, this process right here called the Krebs cycle, its job is to filter out the heavy hydrogen, right? So there are places here where hydrogen gets exited out and water gets deposited in, right? And water gets deposited out. This whole thing, all these 9 steps that you see right here, they are they have a purpose. The purpose is not to just be convoluted and do some, juggling or whatever. The whole point of all these steps is to make sure that the mitochondria, because see, at the end of the day, this Krebs cycle eventually ends up with FADH and NADH coming out of that. Those are what's going to be fed into the electron transport chain. The job of the Krebs cycle is to make sure that the H, or the hydrogen that's being fed into the electron transport chain, is light hydrogen, which also means that the heavy hydrogen has to go somewhere. That goes into your blood. Your blood doesn't have any mitochondria in it. So it's a safe place to deposit deuterium so that it can slowly be excreted out of your body through sweating, through urination, through your skin, etc., because it's already in the blood. And in the blood, it can't affect metabolic processes because there's no mitochondria in your blood. So and it's got a useful thing. Deuterium in the blood allows you to shield yourself from too much electrical activity. That can be from the sun. Right now we're in a solar maximus, so we're getting more solar storms, we're getting more electrical activity everywhere on the planet. If you have plenty of deuterium in the blood, that actually shields you, just like shielding a copper wire in your house. If you had a bare wire, you're going to electrocute things. Well, the blood is using deuterium to shield the rest of the body, the internal organs, from too much electrical activity from nature or even from electromagnetic fields. So that process of having the right amount of deuterium in the blood and the right amount of low deuterium in the cells is actually what can be disrupted. And then the other place where there is large amounts of deuterium is right here.
It almost makes sense why there are so many fruit in the summer that we need it to shield.
Yeah, exactly. Because what are you going to get? You're going to get more solar radiation, right? And so the other place where there is deuterium is right here, the intermitochondrial membrane, right? This membrane, what is it doing? It's a wire. These electrons are electricity, right? So electricity is flowing through this membrane. But we don't want this electricity to electrocute this membrane. We don't want this electricity to leave the mitochondria and electrocute other places in the cell. So how do we shield this electricity from not shocking everything else, just like you would in the house? There needs to be some kind of a shielding effect. What is it? It's deuterium. So deuterium actually gets deposited in the cell membrane, the intermitochondrial membrane, and in the blood, and nowhere else. The water everywhere else takes the protium, the light hydrogen, right? So those are the unique processes that are happening in the body to make sure that deuterium is in the right place and not in the wrong place. And all the things that you describe, being physically active, going outside often, getting a lot of sunlight, those all ensure that when there is too much deuterium, more of those processes get used to excrete deuterium through sweating, through urination, through saliva, except all of those things. And that preserves deuterium being low in the mitochondria and in cells. If you have a deuterium accumulation problem through lifestyle or whatever, right? Or processed foods, like that's the other thing. Processed foods don't have an ability to control that, right? Because they're not being done through natural processes. So when you make, for example, a fake sugar, for example, the hydrogen that's in those molecules is not controlled for. So it could be deuterium heavy. And so if you eat a lot of processed foods, you're probably going to accumulate deuterium in places you shouldn't accumulate it.
Can it bring it to any kind of autoimmune diseases? Because what I see lately, specifically like a bodybuilding world, very high level guys who follow just calories are suddenly having all kind of digestive issues, immunity issues, and whatnot, because they have bought into it's just calorie, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I've done it. I've got in shape by eating junk sandwiches. But it wasn't healthy. It was just stupid. It's just to prove the point that I can get in shape. I would never
Yeah.
do it again.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Because see, deuterium, like I said, it slows or speeds up all metabolic processes, including your immune cells. Your immune cells need to be able to communicate, right? When I say metabolic processes, most people are thinking about like chemical processes, changing one molecule to another, or enzymatic processes. But at the end of the day, there's also another process that nobody talks about, which is intracellular communication and extracellular communication, right? Your brain is communicating with your liver. Your brain is communicating with your gut, and vice versa. And not only that, it's also communicating what you highlighted specifically, your immune system is communicating actively with other cells to see, hey, where are the bad guys that we need to go and attack, and where are the good guys that we need to leave alone? That is a communication thing, right? So if you have a large amounts of deuterium, guess what ends up happening? It's kind of like, well, in the UK, this is probably very relatable, right? There's cameras everywhere, right? Cameras everywhere, communication everywhere. The bad guys can be identified very, very, very quickly. Well, what if all of a sudden somebody went to all those cameras and put Vaseline over them? Now you can't see, right? You can kind of see, but you can't really see very well. Do you think the police are going to have a hard time identifying bad actors? Absolutely. That is the way the deuterium works. When you have a lot of it, it's going to slow down the ability to communicate effectively between cellular systems, including your immune system. So what does that mean? Hey, the cops might get called on somebody who's not actually a bad guy and arrest, a good guy, which is exactly what an autoimmune condition is. Your body cannot correctly identify which cells are you and which cells are the bad guys. So deuterium has a major, major contribution to autoimmune conditions. It has a contribution to everything, including cancer. In fact, that is part of the immune system. Cancer, in order to get rid of, your immune system needs to be able to target it. It needs to be able to actively know this is the cancer cell. We need to get rid of it. If it's high in deuterium and all of your cells are high in deuterium, guess what? Now you can't actually identify which ones are correct. Now, here's a little tidbit of how it's communicating. Reactive oxygen species, right? High amounts of deuterium, like I mentioned, is paramagnetic. That's why it can create like a Faraday effect, which is why you store deuterium in the blood. Well, deuterium allows for larger amounts of reactive oxygen species to be made, right? So normally when a cell is faulty, it's making more reactive oxygen species. And when cells are healthy, they're making lower amounts of reactive oxygen species. And if all the cells are making lots of reactive oxygen species, the immune system can no longer flag it. It's no longer flagging the cell of like, marking it or lighting up a beacon that says, hey, this cell is actually not performing very well. When all the immune system sees is, well, all the cells are creating a lot of reactive oxygen species. How can we tell which one's which? That's how it's muddying the water, right? So the specifics of how it's communicating is through reactive oxygen species and paramagnetism. And it's basically a light show, right? Reactive oxygen species are a type of light, right? Think of it like welding, right? When you weld, you are making a lot of light. That is what reactive oxygen species are doing. They are letting off a lot of light. So when a cell makes a lot more light, aka a lot more reactive oxygen species or inflammation, they're all synonyms, then that tells the body, hey, this cell is not performing very well. We need to keep an eye on it. And if it gets too out of hand, we're going to go through apoptosis or autophagy to get rid of that cell or rebuild it. And if all of your cells are making that extra reactive oxygen species, it can no longer identify good versus bad. And so that leads to autoimmune conditions, that leads to brain fog, that leads to cancer, that leads to all kinds of things. And so that is why I'm so bullish on deuterium depleted water, especially when you do not live a lifestyle that naturally depletes deuterium, or you eat foods chronically that have higher deuterium content in it. The only way you're going to get around it is through a deuterium depleting protocol. And that's kind of what all these influencers, influencing and promoting the hydrogen tablets, they're all talking the same science, but they're forgetting the key thing. There's two types of hydrogen. Are they doing it on purpose? My suspicion is yes. My suspicion is yes, because they just want to make money, right?
Maybe they're not just that smart, to be honest.
Well, that could be true, right? And if that's the case, right, you need to be smarter than them
Because paradoxically, you can do damage by consuming too much deuterium, I would guess, and dumping in reactive oxygen species completely, and now your body doesn't know what to fix.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, right? So that leads us to a question that some people might ask: can you consume too much deuterium depleted water? In the modern world,
Probably not to
probably
stop it,
not.
but
Yeah. Now let's hypothetically say you live somewhere in the middle of nowhere and you're not really influenced by the modern world, then the answer is probably yes. You could consume too much deuterium depleted water and dampen all reactive oxygen species reactions and not actually um, go through proper apoptosis or proper autophagy. Now, having said that, a side effect that I will see when somebody is consuming deuterium depleted water chronically, they have a harder time growing.
mm,
The reason why? No reactive oxygen species. Remember what training is. Training is a metabolically damaging activity that creates reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species signal the repair and the restructuring of tissues. If you're going to consume large amounts of deuterium depleted water, don't expect to be getting large muscles, right? Because you're number one, it does two things. All metabolic processes get enhanced. So AKA you can probably train longer, harder, and not create as much metabolic damage because your processes are enhanced. And when you do train, you're not going to create nearly as much reactive oxygen species. So you're not going to rebuild in a much bigger level. So there's a give and take depending on your goal, right? Like, but if it's for health purposes in the modern world, I would say You're probably going to have a hard time consuming too much deuterium depleted water, um, especially if your goal is to, get fitter and lose body fat and get smaller. Now, if your goal is the opposite, you're already a fit person. Let's just take you for example, right? If you consumed a whole lot of deuterium depleted water, you would probably notice that you get a little bit smaller and that it's a little bit harder to put on muscle size if you're
I'll have to
consuming.
try it out.
Yeah, but again, that's to the tune of you're consuming like 2 liters of deuterium depleted water a day. Like that's quite a bit of deuterium depleted water, and you would have to do it for several months, 2 or 3 months. But you would probably notice some of that effect that you look much leaner, you look a little bit smaller, you're not quite as full and glycogen retentive and stuff like that, and you're probably finding you don't put on weight nearly as easily. That could be a detriment, but that's not normally most people's goal, right? Most people that are asking the question about deuterium depleted water, they usually have something going on, right? Like an autoimmune condition or health outcomes that aren't going as they expect. That's when I can tell that there's deuterium accumulation. And remember, in our deuterium depleted water, vitamin D level tells us, right? Like if you have large amounts of deuterium in your water, you're going to make less of the molecules that are enzyme dependent, specifically hydrogen enzyme dependent. And that's a telltale sign. I mentioned that in that video. If you are spending a lot of time in the sun, but you don't make very much vitamin D, it's a good chance that you have a lot of deuterium in your body. So the good thing about this is you can test your deuterium level. It's just a saliva test. It's not even really invasive. It's just a home kit. And so what I would say is if you are taking hydrogen tablets and that sort of stuff, the thing that you want to watch out for is your deuterium level not going up, right? So and you don't even have to have a baseline, right? Like honestly, I would say if you're somebody that's been taking the hydrogen tablets and you get a deuterium saliva test and your deuterium level is 150, 140, I would say ditch the tablets, right? They're not doing you any good. If you're consuming these regularly and your deuterium level is above 120, the thing that you really want to focus on is either deuterium depleted water or the things that we speak about here consistently all the time that are free, getting the right amount of activity, getting a sweat on, getting aerobic activity up, spending some time out in the sun, especially right now where it is summertime for most people that are listening to us, and starting the natural deuterium depletion processes of the body so that your saliva test comes back close to, 130 would be like the bare minimum. The ideal would be like 120. It is very testable, and you don't have to take my word for it, whether the tablets are doing you good or harm. If you are taking them, you can test your body's deuterium level. And that's really the core concept of this video is just because people say that it's good for you, they may not be telling you the whole truth. But once you figure out the whole truth, which is what you're actually after is low deuterium levels, you can test for that. That is a testable thing.
So for you, it would be making more sense test your Ethereum levels now than if you really want, if there is an issue that it's a bit too high, then you would have wanted to uh, test those tablets after a month or two if they have
Mhm.
worked, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if they are going other way around, definitely stop and make all your friends know that probably avoid this, right? But
Yeah.
okay,
Especially from that brand or that manufacturer.
yeah, yeah. Awesome, David. Appreciate your time as usual. Very in-depth explanation about what to actually look out for because, like we see it all the time, there is new hype everywhere. Just recently I saw someone sharing that nonsense about if you're drinking pre-workout is gonna kill your muscle, and I'm like, read the goddamn study. No, they never tested muscle. They put one little cell and dumped pre-workout on it for 3 days straight, and it died. Like, what are we even talking about? You know what I mean? Like, okay, cool. Uh, but it's understanding this, science that. But if you don't even know what they actually did there, you're just going off by catchy titles, and you actually end up doing more harm than good.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Thanks, David. I'll see you next video.